My name is Daniel, and this happened in January of 1998, during the great ice storm that paralyzed half the Northeast. I was 12 years old then, stuck in that awkward phase between believing in monsters and pretending I didn't. I'm 40 now, old enough to know that childhood memories are often like old VHS tapes, grainy, distorted, prone to skipping. But this memory doesn't skip. It plays in high definition every time the power goes out. It started just after lasagna. That's how I measure the time. My mom had just pulled the pan out of the oven, the cheese bubbling and golden, filling the kitchen with the smell of garlic and tomato sauce. It was a Tuesday, I think, a school night, though school had already been canceled for the next day due to the forecast. The lights flickered while I was pouring milk. Once, twice. "Uh-oh," my dad said, pausing with his fork halfway to his mouth. And then, with a heavy, final thunk, the house died. It wasn't just darkness, it was a sudden, suffocating absence of sound. The hum of the refrigerator stopped, the furnace blower winded down with a dying wheeze. The TV in the living room, which had been broadcasting weather warnings about catastrophic ice accumulation, shrank to a white dot and vanished. For a second, nobody moved. We just sat there in the gray gloom of the winter evening. "All right," my dad said, cutting through the sudden dark. "Nobody panic. Just a line down, probably a branch." My mom went into what I called her general mode. She stood up, wiped her hands on her apron, and started issuing commands. She knew exactly where the flashlights were. She lit the emergency candles, the thick, unscented ones kept in the junk drawer for exactly this reason, and placed them strategically, one on the kitchen island, one in the hallway, one on the coffee table. The candlelight flickered, casting long, jumping shadows against the walls that made the familiar kitchen look strange and cavernous.
Outside, the world was ending. This wasn't snow, it was ice. Freezing rain was hammering the siding like buckshot. You could hear the trees cracking under the weight, loud, gunshot-like snaps that echoed through the woods behind our house. Crack, snap. Every time one broke, my dad flinched. He was thinking about the roof. He was thinking about the car. The wind wasn't howling, it was screaming, a high-pitched keen that rattled the window panes in their frames like someone was trying to shake them loose. "Camping trip," my mom announced, clapping her hands. "Danny, get the pillows from your room. Sarah, get the sleeping bags. We're setting up in the living room." Sarah was my little sister, only 6. She thought it was a game. She squealed and ran to get her stuffed bear, oblivious to the tension in Dad's shoulders. I helped my dad check the doors. He locked the deadbolt on the front door. He checked the back slider. He checked the windows. "Just to keep the heat in," he said, winking at me. But I saw his eyes. He wasn't looking at the seals. He was looking out into the blackness. He was listening to the wind. We built a nest in the living room. Mom made hot chocolate on the gas range, which still worked without power. We sat in a circle of pillows, illuminated by the flickering orange light of the candles. For an hour, it was fun. It felt like an adventure. We told ghost stories, tame ones, so Sarah wouldn't get scared. Mom told the one about the golden arm, and Dad did shadow puppets on the wall. But then the conversation died down. We ran out of stories. We just sat there, listening to the house creak. Old houses make noise, I knew that, but this was different. The house sounded like it was under attack. The wind buffeted the walls, making the timbers groan. Ice pelted the glass like gravel.
Then the lightning started. It's rare to see lightning in a winter storm, but this system was a monster. It was violent. Crack boom. The thunder shook the floorboards, vibrating right up through my spine. "Thunder snow," my dad whispered, looking up at the ceiling. "Rare. That means it's intense." The first flash lit up the room like a strobe light, bleaching all the color out of the furniture. It illuminated the backyard through the sliding glass door for a split second. I looked out. The yard was a glaze of ice. The swing set looked like a glass sculpture, shimmering and deadly. The woods were a tangled mess of white wires. It was empty. I went back to my comic book, reading by candlelight, trying to ignore the feeling that the storm was trying to get in. 10 minutes later, the second flash came. Flash! I looked up automatically. There was someone standing in the yard. "Okay, my turn," Dad said, his face illuminated from below by the flashlight, making his features look hollow and strange. "This is the story of the Hook Man." "No," Sarah squealed. "Too scary." "It's not scary," Dad promised, though he winked at me. "It's funny. The Hook Man just wanted a back scratch." We laughed. It felt normal. It felt safe.
The candlelight made the room feel like a cave, a warm little pocket of humanity in the middle of a frozen universe. We ate popcorn, we drank the cocoa. I forgot about the storm outside. I forgot that the phone lines were down. But the house didn't let us forget for long. Creak. A timber settled somewhere upstairs. Just the wind, Mom said, though she glanced at the ceiling. Old house. It talks when it's cold. It's saying it's freezing, I joked. Nobody laughed. He was standing by the old oak tree, about 50 feet from the house. Just a silhouette, a black cutout against the blinding white-blue backdrop of the ice. My brain did that thing kids' brains do. It tried to make it safe.
It tried to categorize the anomaly into something mundane. It's Mr. Henderson, I thought. He's looking for his dog. Or it's a fireman checking the lines. But the thought dissolved before it could fully form. Mr. Henderson was 70 and walked with a cane. No fireman would be standing in the middle of a yard, 50 feet from the road, in an ice storm without a flashlight. No one would be out there. It was physically painful to be outside. "Dad?" I said. My voice sounded too loud in the quiet room. It cracked a little. "What is it, bud?" My dad was trying to tune a battery-powered radio, holding it up to his ear, frowning at the static. "There's a guy," I said, "by the tree." My dad stopped tuning. The static hissed in the silence. He looked at me, then at the window. "Probably just a shadow, Danny. The trees are moving a lot. The wind plays tricks." "No," I said, feeling a cold knot form in my stomach. "It was a guy. He was standing there." My mom looked up from her book. "Danny, don't scare your sister." Then the third flash came. Flash! My dad saw him this time. He was closer. He wasn't by the tree anymore. He was halfway across the lawn, standing near the frozen bird path. He hadn't moved like a person moves. He wasn't leaned forward against the wind. He wasn't shielding his face from the stinging ice. His arms were down at his sides. He was standing perfectly straight, like a soldier at attention. My dad stood up so fast his chair tipped over. The radio clattered to the floor. "Helen," he said to my mom, his voice low and tight, "take the kids into the hallway." "What?" Mom stood up, her face changing from annoyed to confused to scared in a second. She looked at Dad's face and saw the fear there. "Just do it," Dad said. He stepped toward the window, but he didn't go right up to it. He stayed back a few feet, watching the glass. "Who is it?" Mom whispered, grabbing Sarah's hand. Sarah started to whine. "I don't know," Dad said, "but he's not moving. He's just standing there." "Is he hurt?" Mom asked. "Is he stuck? Maybe he needs help." "No," Dad said. "He's watching." We moved into the hallway. It was the center of the house, away from the windows, the safest place in a tornado or an invasion. Mom sat us down on the floor. Sarah started to whimper, burying her face in Mom's sweater. "Shh," Mom said, smoothing her hair. "It's okay. Daddy's just checking. It's just the storm." I sat at the edge of the hallway, peeking around the corner into the living room. I couldn't help it. The fear was like a magnet. It pulled my eyes toward the thing I didn't want to see. The next flash came sooner. Flash! He was at the patio. He was standing right at the edge of the concrete slab, maybe 10 feet from the glass. He was tall. He was wearing a heavy coat with a hood up. It looked like an old army coat, bulky and stiff. I couldn't see a face, just a black void where a face should be. And he was still perfectly, unnaturally still. The wind was whipping the trees behind him, bending them almost to the ground. Debris was flying through the air. Ice was shattering, but he didn't flinch. He didn't sway. He didn't lift a hand to block the wind. It was like he was cut out of a photo and pasted onto a different background, a background where it was calm. "Call the police," Dad said. He hadn't moved from his spot in the living room. "The lines are down, Frank," Mom hissed. "The phone is dead. I checked it 10 minutes ago. Try the cell," Dad said. Mom pulled out her old Nokia brick. She stared at the screen, tapping the buttons frantically. "Searching," she whispered. "No signal. The towers must be iced over." We were alone. We were completely cut off, and he was getting closer. I tried to see his face. I squinted against the glare of the lightning, but there was nothing, just smooth darkness. It wasn't that he was wearing a mask. It was like the light just didn't go there, like he was a void in the shape of a man. And his clothes, they didn't look right. They looked heavy, stiff, like old canvas, like something from a different time. "He's not dressed for this," I whispered. "Dad, he's not wearing gloves." "What?" Dad asked, not looking at me. "His hands, they're bare.
Dad looked. Flash. He was right. The man's hands hung at his sides. They were pale, white, like the ice. They weren't clenched in fists. They weren't tucked in pockets. They were just hanging there, exposed to the freezing rain. That detail made me colder than the draft in the hallway. My dad went to the kitchen drawer. I heard the silverware rattle. He came back with his heavy Maglite flashlight, the big metal one that takes 4 D-cell batteries, and a hammer. It looked ridiculous. My dad was an accountant. He wore cardigans. He wasn't a fighter. Seeing him holding a hammer in the flickering candlelight made my stomach turn over. It made it real. It meant the rules of the world had changed. "Get away from the door, Frank," Mom said, her voice trembling. "I need to see if he's trying to get in," Dad said. "I need to show him we're awake." He stood there, waiting for the lightning. I counted the seconds. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3. Flash. He was right there. He was standing directly in front of the sliding glass door. He was so close that his chest was almost touching the glass. I saw the texture of his coat, wet, heavy wool, crusted with ice. I saw the water dripping off his hood. But I didn't see a face. The hood was pulled so far forward, it was just darkness.
And he wasn't looking at the lock. He wasn't trying to open the door. He didn't have a weapon in his hands. He was just standing there, facing us. "Hey!" Dad shouted at the glass, brandishing the hammer. "Get the hell away from here! I have a gun!" He didn't have a gun. We didn't even own a BB gun. The man didn't react. He didn't flinch at the voice. He didn't look at the hammer. He didn't blink. The darkness swallowed him again as the flash faded. We waited for the sound of breaking glass, the sound of the door being kicked in, the sound of shouting. But it didn't come. Instead, we heard something worse. Scrape. It was a soft sound, deliberate, like metal dragging on siding, or a fingernail on a chalkboard, or a zipper pulling slowly. It started at the sliding door and moved to the right, toward the living room window, toward where I was peeking out. "He's moving around the house," Dad whispered. "He's checking the perimeter. He's looking for a way in." My mom grabbed me by the shirt and yanked me back into the hallway. "Danny, stay here. Don't look." She pushed me down next to Sarah. Sarah was crying silently now, big tears rolling down her cheeks. "Sing a song," Mom whispered to her. "Sing your school song. Ignore the noise." We sat in the dark hallway, listening to the scrape. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It moved along the living room wall. Then it stopped. Then it started again on the kitchen wall. He was circling us. He was walking around the house, running something along the siding as he went. He was feeling the house. Dad moved to the front hallway, standing by the front door. He held the hammer raised, his knuckles white. "If he breaks in," Dad said to Mom, his voice low, "you take them out the back. Run to the Millers." "The Millers are away," Mom said. "They went to Florida." "Then run to the woods."
Hide in the deer stand. I had never heard my dad talk like that. It sounded like a movie. It sounded like the end of the world. The scraping stopped at the front door. We held our breaths. I watched the doorknob. It rattled, just a tiny bit. Click, click. Then silence. No pounding, no shouting. Just the wind. The wait for the next flash was agonizing. In the movies, lightning flashes constantly. In real life, there's a pause, a heavy, dark pause, where your eyes try to adjust but can't. I stared at the spot where he had been. I imagined him moving closer. I imagined him raising a hand to the glass. "Frank," Mom whispered, "please come away from the window." "I have to see," Dad said. He was trembling. I could see the hammer shaking in his hand. He wasn't brave. That's what scared me the most. He was terrified. He was just a dad, a guy who did taxes and mowed the lawn, standing between his family and something he didn't understand. Flash. The light exploded into the room again, and he was still there, still watching. The sound changed as it moved. At first, on the final siding, it was a sss sound, but when it hit the brick chimney, it became a grrr-it. Hard, sharp. It sounded like metal or bone. I imagined a fingernail dragging along the rough bricks, a long, frozen fingernail. Grrr-it, grrr-it. It was testing the house. It was looking for a crack. It was looking for a way in. I put my hands over my ears. I didn't want to hear it, but I could feel the vibration in the floor. He was touching our house. He was touching the shell that kept us safe. We stayed in that hallway for 6 hours. Nobody slept. My dad sat in a chair facing the front door, the hammer resting on his knee. My mom sat with her back against the wall, holding Sarah and me so tight my ribs hurt. She stroked my hair, but her hand was shaking.
The lightning stopped around 3 a.m. The wind died down an hour later. The silence that followed was heavy. It pressed against my ears. It was a waiting silence. I kept waiting for the scrape. I kept waiting for the glass to shatter, but nothing happened. When the sun finally came up, the light that filtered through the curtains was gray and weak. "Stay here," Dad croaked. His voice was hoarse. He stood up. He walked to the window. He peeked through the slit in the curtains. He stood there for a long time. Then, he unlocked the front door. "Frank," Mom whispered. "Don't." "It's clear," he said. "He's gone." He stepped out onto the porch. I scrambled up and ran to the window. I had to see. The storm was over. The world was encased in ice. Everything glittered. It was blindingly bright. The trees were bowed low, touching the ground. Dad walked slowly around the house. He had the hammer in his belt loop now. He looked small against the white landscape. He stopped at the sliding glass door in the back. He stood there, looking down. Then he waved Mom over. I ran to the back door. Mom didn't stop me this time. We looked out through the glass. The snow on the patio was undisturbed, pristine white, a perfect sheet of ice. Except for one spot, right against the glass, there were 2 deep depressions, boot prints. They were fused into the ice. They were perfectly parallel, facing the door, and there were no footprints leading to them, and there were no footprints leading away. It was impossible, unless he had flown, or unless he had stood there for so long, so perfectly still, that the ice had formed around him, and the wind had filled in his tracks as he arrived and left. But the prints were there, deep, heavy, proof that he had been there, proof that he had stood inches from us, watching us in the candlelight.
My dad stared at them for a minute. Then he went to the garage. He came back with a shovel. He didn't just shovel the patio, he scraped it. He chipped at the ice until the footprints were gone. He threw the snow into the woods. He worked frantically, sweat steaming off his back in the freezing air. He attacked the ice. He didn't stop until the patio was bare concrete. He came back inside and locked the door. "Just ice falling from the roof," he said. He wouldn't look at me. "Just chunks of ice hitting the ground." "But Dad," I started. "I saw." "Just ice, Danny," he said. His voice was hard, final. End of story. We never talked about it. The power came back on 2 days later. Life went back to normal. But that spring, my dad cut down the oak tree in the backyard, and he installed motion sensor lights on every corner of the house. I'm 40 now. I have my own house. I have my own kids. But whenever a winter storm rolls in and the wind starts to scream, I close the curtains, and I never, ever look out when the lightning flashes, because I know that some things don't move in the wind, and some things don't leave tracks when they walk away. And sometimes, when the house is quiet, I can still hear that scraping sound. To keep us calm, Mom started a game. "I spy," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I spy with my little eye. Something red." "Sarah's socks," I whispered back. "Good job, Danny." "I spy. Something blue." "The rug," Sarah whispered. We played I Spy in the dark hallway while my dad stood guard at the door with a hammer. We played until we ran out of colors. We played until Sarah fell asleep against Mom's shoulder. I didn't sleep. I watched Dad. He shifted his weight from foot to foot. He rubbed his eyes. He never put the hammer down. Every time the wind gusted, he tensed up. He was the sentry. He was the wall. And I realized then that being a dad wasn't about not being scared.
It was about being scared and staying at the door anyway. Sometimes I wonder if he was ever really there. Maybe it was a shared hallucination. Maybe the stress and the carbon monoxide from the candles made us see things. But then I remember the footprints. 2 deep, perfect impressions in the solid ice. You can't hallucinate a hole in the ice. And I remember something else. Something I never told my dad. When I was peeking out the window, during that last flash, when he was right at the glass, I saw his eyes, just for a second. They weren't looking at Dad. They weren't looking at the hammer. They were looking at me, and they were smiling. I live in a city now. I live on the 10th floor. I don't have a yard. I don't have trees. But when the power goes out and the wind howls, I still sit in the hallway and I listen for the scrape. And I pray that the lights come back on.